I stood in the doorway of the church where my family was taking me on my last journey. My son Mark was giving the eulogy and Kristen was wiping away fake tears. They were celebrating that I was gone, sharing the legacy I had earned with sweat and blood. But I was alive. I walked into the church and said, "You are celebrating early." Their faces turned white, as if they had seen a ghost. And that was just the beginning. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. The first thing I felt was pain, a dull ache radiating from my chest, as if someone had parked a truck on my ribs. My eyelids fluttered, heavy as lead, and the world swam into focus, blurred, sterile, wrong. A steady beat pierced the fog in my head, matched by the rhythmic hum of machines. I was in a hospital bed, tangled in tubes and wires, the cold plastic of an A4 line biting into my arm. The air smelled of disinfectant, sharp and chemical, stinging my nostrils. I tried to move my fingers, but they twitched weakly, like a fish flopping on a dock. Where was I? What happened? I blinked, squinting against the fluorescent light overhead. A crack snaked across the ceiling, jagged like a lightning bolt frozen in plaster. My throat was dry, my tongue a useless lump. I wanted to call out, but all I managed was a raspy croak. Footsteps approached, quick and soft, and a woman's face appeared above me, brown eyes, graying hair tucked into a bun, a nurse's badge clipped to her scrubs. "Janet," it read. "Mr. Turner, oh my goodness, you're awake." Her voice was bright, almost giddy, like she'd won a prize. "It's a miracle, truly. Let me get the doctor." She bustled away before I could respond, her sneakers squeaking on the linoleum. A miracle? I didn't feel miraculous. I felt like I'd been chewed up and spit out. Fragments of memory flickered, screeching tires, the crunch of metal, a blinding flash of headlights. An accident. I'd been driving home from the office, hadn't I? The details slipped away, like water through my fingers. I shifted, wincing as pain shot through my ribs. My gaze drifted to the door of the room, heavy and beige, firmly shut. It felt like a wall between me and the world. Janet returned with a man in a white coat, his glasses perched on a thin nose. "Dr. Clark," he introduced himself, his voice clipped but kind. He checked the monitors, scribbled on a chart, and asked me questions I could barely answer. Name? Ronald Turner. Age? 62. Did I know what year it was? I guessed 2025, and he nodded, satisfied. My head throbbed, but I forced myself to focus. How long? I croaked, my voice barely audible. How long was I out? Dr. Clark hesitated, glancing at Janet. She stepped closer, her smile softening. 2 months, Mr. Turner. You were in a coma after the accident. We weren't sure you'd pull through. 2 months. The words hit like a punch. 2 months of my life, gone. I swallowed, my throat tight. My family, did they? I couldn't finish. I didn't need to. Janet's smile faltered, and she looked away, fussing with the A4 line. They've been informed, she said carefully, her tone too gentle, like she was handling glass. I'm sure they'll be here soon, now that you're awake. Informed. Not visiting. Not waiting by my bedside. My chest tightened, and it wasn't just the pain in my ribs. Mark, my son, my only child. I'd given him everything, his first car, his college tuition, a job at my company when he flunked out of his big plans. And Kristen, his wife, always smiling that sharp, calculated smile. Where were they? I gripped the bedsheet, my knuckles whitening. The door loomed in my peripheral vision, silent and unmoving. No one was coming through it. I closed my eyes, trying to piece together the accident. I remembered the rain-slicked road, the glow of Hartford streetlights, the sudden jolt of impact. A truck, maybe. The smell of gasoline, the sound of sirens. My truck, my old Ford, the one Mark always mocked for being ancient. Had he even checked on it? Had he checked on me? "Mr. Turner, you need rest," Dr. Clark said, adjusting a monitor. "Your vitals are stable, but you're still weak. We'll talk discharge soon, maybe in a day or two." I nodded, barely listening. Discharge. Home. I needed to get out of this sterile cage, back to my life. I asked for my phone, but Janet handed me a plastic bag with my belongings, wallet, keys, a cracked watch. The phone was dead, its screen dark. Another tether to the world, cut. Janet lingered, her hands clasped. "You're lucky to be alive," she said, her voice warm but tinged with pity. "Not everyone walks away from something like that." Lucky. I didn't feel lucky. I felt abandoned. My gaze drifted back to the door, its handle gleaming faintly under the fluorescent light. Beyond it was Hartford, my city, my home. Beyond it was Mark, Kristen, and whatever they'd been doing while I lay here, forgotten. I had to know why they hadn't come. I had to know what they were hiding. "I want to go home," I said, my voice steadier now. "Tomorrow." Janet frowned, but Dr. Clark nodded. "We'll see how you're doing in the morning. If you're stable, we can arrange it." I lay back, the pillow stiff against my neck. The machines beeped, a relentless reminder of my fragility. I stared at the door, willing it to open, willing Mark to walk through with some excuse, some reason. But it stayed shut, a silent barrier between me and the truth. My hand tightened on the bedsheet, the fabric rough under my fingers. 2 months, and no one came. The thought burned, sharp and cold, like a blade in my gut. By the time Janet returned to check my I'd made up my mind. "Call me a taxi tomorrow," I told her, my voice low but firm. "I'm going home." She nodded, her expression unreadable. I turned my head to the window, where the first light of a May morning crept through the blinds. Hartford lay out there, its red brick buildings and budding trees waiting for me. So did Mark. So did answers. I closed my eyes, the pain in my chest fading to a dull roar. Whatever waited at home, I'd face it. I had to. The taxi jolted to a stop, and I handed the driver a crumpled 20, my hands trembling from the effort of holding the bill. My legs wobbled as I stepped onto the curb, the spring air of Hartford filling my lungs with a mix of pollen and promise. My house stood before me, a 2-story colonial with red brick and white trim, the kind of place I'd built for a family that no longer seemed to care. The lawn was overgrown, dandelions choking the grass, and the mailbox sagged, stuffed with envelopes that spilled like forgotten secrets. 2 months, and no one had bothered to check. I gripped my plastic bag of belongings, wallet, keys, that cracked watch, and shuffled toward the porch. Each step sent a jolt of pain through my knees, a reminder of the coma's toll. The air smelled of lilacs from the neighbor's yard, sweet and mocking against the neglect of my own. I fumbled with the keys, the lock stiff from disuse. The door creaked open, a low groan that echoed in the empty foyer. Inside, dust coated the oak table where we used to eat Sunday dinners. A faint whiff of damp wood hung in the air, and I noticed the cat's bowl in the corner, empty and dry. Where was Rusty? Had Mark even fed him? I set the bag down, my chest tight, not from pain, but from the weight of absence. The living room was untouched, the couch cushions still dented from my last nap before the accident. But the silence was wrong, heavy, like the house was holding its breath. I crossed to the window, pulling back the faded curtains. Sunlight spilled in, illuminating motes of dust that danced like ghosts. My gaze fell on the front door again, its chipped paint a stark contrast to the polished brass handle. It felt like a gate to a life I no longer recognized. I was about to head upstairs when a sharp gasp snapped me back. Across the street, a figure stood frozen on her lawn, a bright yellow scarf fluttering around her neck. Marjorie, my neighbor for 20 years, stared at me like I was a specter. Her hand clutched her chest, and she took a shaky step forward, her voice trembling. "Ronald? Ronald Turner? You're alive." I frowned, stepping onto the porch. "Marge, what's wrong?" "Of course I'm alive." My voice sounded hoarse and used. The grass crunched under my shoes as I crossed the lawn toward her. She shook her head, her eyes wide. "But, they said you were dead. They're holding your memorial right now, at St. Luke's." Her words hit like a sledgehammer, and I stopped dead, my heart pounding. "Memorial? My memorial? What are you talking about?" I demanded, my voice sharper than I intended. "Who's they?" Marjorie wrung her hands, the scarf slipping to her shoulder. "Mark, your son. And Kristen. They organized it. Said you didn't make it after the accident." She hesitated, her gaze darting away. "Everyone's there, Ronald. The whole town. The world tilted. Mark. Kristen. My own son, my daughter-in-law, telling the world I was gone." I gripped the porch railing, my knuckles white. The spring breeze felt cold now, cutting through my thin hospital shirt. "They said I was dead." I repeated, my voice low, dangerous. Marjorie nodded, her lips trembling. "I'm so sorry, Ronald. We all thought," she trailed off, tears welling in her eyes. I turned away, my gaze locking on the house, my life, left to rot while they played their game. I thought of Mark, his lazy grin as he asked for just one more loan. Kristen, her eyes glinting when she admired my company's balance sheets. They'd planned this, hadn't they? While I lay in that hospital bed, fighting to breathe, they'd buried me in their minds, maybe in their hearts. For what? Money? My company? The thought burned, a slow, searing rage that steadied my shaking hands. I looked back at Marjorie, her face pale with shock. "Where's St. Luke's from here?" I asked, though I knew the way. I needed to hear it, to anchor myself. "Down Elm Street, 10 minutes walk," she said softly. "Ronald, are you sure you're—" "I'm sure," I cut her off, my voice hard. I turned back to the house, catching my reflection in the foyer mirror as I passed. Gray hair, sunken cheeks, eyes like chipped flint. I barely recognized myself, but the man in the mirror had a purpose. I grabbed my jacket from the hall closet, ignoring the ache in my bones. The door swung shut behind me with a hollow thud, and I stepped onto the sidewalk, my shoes scuffing the pavement. The street was quiet, the kind of May afternoon where kids should be riding bikes and neighbors chatting over fences. Instead, it felt like a stage, empty except for me and the truth waiting at St. Luke's. I walked faster, ignoring the tremor in my legs. The church was close, its steeple piercing the sky like a needle. I could hear the faint toll of bells now, slow and mournful, calling me forward. My mind raced, piecing together Marjorie's words. A memorial. My memorial. Mark's voice, Kristen's crocodile tears, they'd turned my life into a performance, a lie. I clenched my fists, the cracked watch digging into my palm. Whatever they were playing at, it ended today. The bells grew louder, and I rounded the corner, the church's stone facade looming ahead. My heart pounded, not from weakness, but from a fire I hadn't felt in years. They thought I was gone. They were wrong. The streets of Hartford unfolded before me, a patchwork of cobblestone and blooming magnolias, but I barely saw them. My legs ached, each step a reminder of the coma's theft, but I pushed forward, driven by a fury that burned hotter than the May sun. The air carried the scent of fresh-cut grass and coffee from a corner cafe, but it couldn't mask the bitterness in my throat. Mark, my son, my blood, had declared me dead. Kristen, with her polished nails and sharper ambition, had helped him. Why? The question gnawed at me, a splinter in my mind, as I walked toward St. Luke's. Elm Street was quiet, the kind of quiet that amplifies every sound, the rustle of leaves, the distant hum of a car, the toll of church bells calling me closer. I passed the cafe where I used to buy Mark his Sunday lattes, back when he still bothered to show up for family time. The memory stung, him at 16, all elbows and dreams, promising to make me proud. I'd bought him his first car, a beat-up Chevy, and watched him grin as he peeled out of the driveway. I'd paid for his college, his business ventures, his failures. And now? A memorial. My fingers curled into fists, the cracked watch on my wrist ticking like a countdown. A man in a tweed cap shuffled past, his eyes widening as he caught my face. "Ronald Turner," he muttered, half to himself, then hurried away, his cane tapping the sidewalk. I froze, my pulse spiking. Did the whole town think I was a ghost? The thought fueled my steps, the church's steeple now visible above the trees. Its doors, tall and arched, loomed in my mind, a threshold to the truth. I crossed a small park, the same one where I'd pushed Mark on swings when he was small. Another memory surfaced, unbidden. Mark at 25, slouched in my office, asking for a loan. "Just seed money, Dad," he'd said, his eyes avoiding mine. "I've got a plan." I'd written the check, ignoring the warning in my gut. Months later, I found out he'd blown it on a sports car and a Vegas trip with Kristen. I'd forgiven him, like always. But this? Declaring me dead? This was no mistake. This was betrayal, carved deep. The bells tolled again, louder now, vibrating in my chest. I rounded a corner, and St. Luke's came into view, its stone walls glowing in the afternoon light. Potted flowers lined the steps, their petals scattered on the cobblestone like confetti from a cruel joke. My breath hitched, not from exhaustion, but from the weight of what lay ahead. I thought of Kristen, her voice dripping honey as she admired my house, my company, my life. "You've built something special, Ronald," she'd said once, her eyes calculating. I'd brushed it off then. Now, I saw it for what it was, greed, dressed up in charm. A woman with a stroller passed me, her glance lingering too long. I kept moving, my shoes scuffing the pavement. The church was close, its doors just across the street. I could hear faint voices now, a murmur of hymns seeping through the stone. My hand brushed the cracked watch, its face frozen at 7:42, the time of the accident, maybe, or the moment my life fractured. I didn't know. What I did know was that Mark and Kristen had crossed a line, and I was done forgiving. I stopped at the edge of the sidewalk, the church's shadow falling over me. The doors were heavy oak, carved with crosses, their handles worn from years of hands seeking solace. To me, they were a gate to answers, to justice. My chest tightened, not with pain, but with purpose. I thought of Mark's lazy grin, Kristen's practiced tears. They'd played their parts, convinced the world I was gone. But I wasn't. I was here, and they were about to learn what that meant. My hand reached for the door, the metal cool under my fingers. The hymns grew clearer, a soft chorus of mourning for a man who wasn't dead. My heart pounded, a drumbeat of rage and resolve. Whatever waited inside, lies, excuses, or something worse, I was ready. I had to be. The bells tolled once more, and I tightened my grip, the door creaking as I began to pull. The heavy oak doors of St. Luke's groaned as I shoved them open, the sound cutting through the soft hymn like a blade. The air inside was thick with the scent of incense and wax, and the flickering glow of candles cast shadows on the Gothic stained glass windows. Rows of pews stretched before me, filled with faces I'd known for years, neighbors, colleagues, old friends, all frozen mid-note, their eyes wide as I stepped into the light. My silhouette loomed against the spring sunlight streaming through the open doors, and I let the moment hang, my heart pounding with a cold, steady fire. "You're celebrating a bit early, aren't you?" My voice rang out, sharp and deliberate, slicing through the silence. Gasps rippled through the crowd. A woman in a black hat clutched her chest, whispering "ghost" to her husband. An elderly couple near the back stumbled toward the aisle, their footsteps echoing on the hardwood floor. I stood firm, my gaze locked on the front pew where Mark and Kristen sat, their heads snapping toward me like puppets on strings. Mark's face drained of color, his mouth half open as if words had abandoned him. Kristen's hand tightened on her purse, her knuckles white, her perfect makeup doing little to hide the panic in her eyes. The hymnals trembled in people's hands, and the candles along the altar flickered as a draft swept through the open doors behind me, a fitting symbol of the lie I'd just shattered. I took a step forward, my shoes scuffing the polished floor. The pain in my chest was gone, replaced by a clarity I hadn't felt in months. "Thought I was dead, did you?" I said, my voice low but carrying to every corner. "Funny how quick you moved on." The crowd shifted, whispers buzzing like flies. Mark lurched to his feet, his tie askew, and hurried down the aisle toward me. "Dad, what are you doing here?" he hissed, his voice a mix of fear and fury. He grabbed my arm, his fingers digging in, but I shook him off, my eyes never leaving his. Up close, I saw the sweat beading on his forehead, the way his jaw twitched. Guilty. The word burned in my mind. "Dad?" I repeated, loud enough for the front rows to hear. "You don't get to call me that. Not after this." I gestured to the church, the flowers, the framed photo of me on the altar, smiling, oblivious, taken from last Christmas. "You buried me, Mark. You and her." I nodded toward Kristen, who hadn't moved, her gaze darting like a trapped animal's. Mark's voice dropped, pleading now. "You don't understand. It was a mistake, okay? We thought." "A mistake?" I cut him off, my voice rising. 2 months in a coma, and you didn't even visit. But you found time to plan this?" I swept my arm toward the pews, the mourners, the lie. "What was it, Mark? The company? The house? My money?" The whispers grew louder, a tide of shock and judgment. Kristen stood, smoothing her dress with shaky hands, and started toward us, her heels clicking. "Ronald, please," she said, her voice syrupy but strained. "This isn't the place. Let's talk outside." I laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the stone walls. "Oh, we'll talk, Kristen. But not on your terms." I turned back to Mark, my voice steady as steel. "I gave you everything. Your car, your education, your second chances. And this is how you repay me?" Mark's eyes flicked to the crowd, then back to me. "You're making a scene," he muttered, his hand hovering near my elbow again. "Let's go. Now." I stepped back, out of his reach. "No. You don't get to control this. Not anymore." My gaze swept the church, taking in the stunned faces, the half-burned candles, the open doors still swaying slightly in the breeze. The truth was out, raw and ugly, and I felt it settle into me like a foundation. This was just the beginning. Kristen reached us, her smile tight. "Ronald, you're not well. You need rest." Her words were a performance, meant for the crowd, but I saw the fear in her eyes, the crack in her perfect facade. "I'm well enough to see what you've done," I said, my voice cold. "And I'm well enough to make sure everyone else sees it too." I turned to the crowd, raising my voice. "This isn't a memorial. It's a theft. And I'm not dead yet." A murmur of agreement rippled through the pews, and I caught a few nods, a few angry glances at Mark and Kristen. Mark's face reddened, and he grabbed my arm again, harder this time. "Enough," he snapped, pulling me toward the doors. I yanked free, my strength surprising even me. "You don't get to decide when it's enough," I said, my voice a low growl. I turned and strode toward the doors, the crowd parting like a sea. The spring air hit me as I stepped outside, the bells tolling once more, slow and heavy. Behind me, I heard Kristen's sharp whisper to Mark, the shuffle of feet, the rising tide of voices. "They'd try to spin this, to save face. Let them." I had the truth, and I had time. I started down the church steps, my mind racing. I needed answers, real ones, not their lies. Frank, my old friend and lawyer, would know where to start. He'd always warned me about Mark's spending, about Kristen's ambition. I should have listened. The street stretched before me, lined with blooming dogwoods, their petals drifting like snow. I clenched my fists, the ache in my chest now a distant echo. Whatever Mark and Kristen were planning, I'd find out. And I'd stop them. The pub smelled of hops and old wood, the kind of place where Hartford's locals gathered to drown their days in amber light and quiet chatter. I sat at a corner table, the folder from Frank unopened in front of me, its edges worn from my restless fingers. The glass of beer I'd ordered sat untouched. Beads of condensation pooling on the scarred tabletop. A crack ran along the wall beside me, jagged like the fault line in my life. I'd come here after the church, needing a place to think, to breathe, away from the whispers and lies. Mark's face, pale, sweating, flashed in my mind, and I gripped the table's edge, steadying the rage that threatened to spill over. The door creaked, and Frank walked in, his gray suit rumpled, his eyes heavy with the weight of bad news. He spotted me and nodded, sliding into the chair across from me with a sigh. "You look like hell, Ron," he said, his voice gruff but kind. He set a thick manila folder on the table, its weight thudding against the wood. Documents. Proof, maybe, of what I'd already begun to suspect. "Didn't sleep," I said, my voice low. "What've you got?" Frank leaned forward, his fingers tapping the folder. "You sure you want to do this now? After the stunt you pulled at St. Luke's, half the town's talking. Let them talk." I met his gaze, unflinching. "Show me." He exhaled, flipping open the folder. Papers spilled out, legal forms, signatures, stamps that looked too official to be fake. "This," he said, sliding a document toward me, "is a death certificate. Yours. Dated a month ago." My name stared back at me in crisp black ink, Ronald James Turner, deceased. The paper trembled slightly in my hand, not from weakness, but from a fury I could barely contain. "They forged it," I said, not a question. The words tasted like ash. Frank nodded. "Mark filed it with the county. Kristen hired a lawyer, some slick out-of-towner, to push the paperwork through. They've been working fast, Ron. Your company's already on the market. They've got buyers lined up, ready to carve it up." I set the certificate down, my fingers curling into fists. My company, 30 years of sweat, late nights, and deals sealed on handshakes, reduced to a payday for my son and his scheming wife. I thought of Kristen's voice at the church, smooth as silk, urging me to rest. I thought of Mark's sweaty palms, his lies crumbling under the weight of my presence. They'd planned this while I lay in a coma, my life hanging by a thread. How'd they pull it off? I asked, my voice steady despite the storm inside. Frank rubbed his jaw, glancing around the pub. The bartender was wiping glasses, oblivious, while a couple laughed softly at the bar. "They claimed the hospital lost track of you," he said. "Told everyone you died in surgery. With no visitors, no one to contradict them, it was easy. They had your will, too, altered, of course. Everything goes to Mark." I laughed, a bitter sound that drew a glance from the bartender. "My will. I left him the house, the savings, but not the company." That was for, I stopped, the words catching. For him to earn, I'd always thought. To prove himself. Instead, he'd stolen it. Frank leaned closer, his voice dropping. "Ron, you've got grounds to fight this. Fraud, forgery, theft. But it's messy. They've got money, your money, and a head start. You need to be smart, not loud." "Smart," I repeated, tasting the word. Smart meant planning, waiting, striking when they least expected it. I thought of Kristen's panicked eyes, Mark's trembling hands. They were sloppy, scared. I could use that. What else is in there? I nodded at the folder. He slid another paper over, a contract with a buyer's name I didn't recognize. They're selling to a developer. Big money, fast deal. Closings in 2 weeks. His eyes met mine, steady but worried. You've got time, but not much. I stared at the contract, the numbers blurring. Millions. My life's work, sold off like a used car. I remembered bringing Mark to the office as a kid, letting him spin in my chair, promising him a future if he worked for it. Now, he'd taken it, with Kristen pulling the strings. Her ambition, her greed, it was clearer now. She wasn't just along for the ride. She was driving. What do I do? I asked, not because I was lost, but because I needed to hear it, to cement the path forming in my mind. Frank sighed. Get a lawyer, not me, someone cutthroat. File an injunction to freeze the sale. Prove you're alive, which, after today, won't be hard. He smirked faintly. But Ron, watch your back. They're desperate now. You've rattled them. I nodded, my fingers tracing the edge of the death certificate. It felt flimsy, a lie made of paper, but it had almost worked. Almost. I closed the folder, the thud final. Thanks, Frank. I'll take it from here. He studied me, his brow furrowed. Don't do anything stupid, okay? You're not as young as you used to be. I managed a grim smile. Stupid's their game, not mine. I stood, tucking the folder under my arm. The PAB's noise faded as I stepped into the night, the air cool against my skin. Hartford streetlights glowed, casting long shadows on the cobblestone. I walked, the folder heavy in my hands, each step sharpening the plan taking shape in my mind. Mark and Kristen thought they'd won. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The house was too quiet, the kind of silence that presses against your ears until you hear your own heartbeat. I sat at the kitchen table, the folder from Frank open before me, its papers spread like a map of betrayal. The death certificate, the contract, the forged will, they stared up at me, each one a cut deeper than the last. The old clock on the wall ticked, its rhythm steady but mocking, counting seconds I'd almost lost forever. The air smelled of dust and neglect, the curtains heavy with shadows. I ran a finger over the certificate, my name inked like a gravestone. Mark and Kristen had buried me on paper, and I felt the weight of that lie in my bones. I leaned back, my chair creaking. The house felt like a stranger's now, its corners hiding memories I wasn't ready to face. Mark's laughter as a boy, Kristen's polite smiles at family dinners, had it all been a performance? I thought of her, always watching, always calculating, her eyes lingering on the company's ledgers, the house's deed. She'd wanted this life, not me, not Mark. And Mark, too weak to say no, had followed her lead. The thought tightened my chest, but I pushed it down. No time for pity. Not now. The silence was suffocating, driving me out. I grabbed the folder and my jacket, stepping into the spring night. Hartford streets were alive with the hum of evening, crickets, distant car horns, the rustle of blooming trees. The PAB wasn't far, the same one I'd met Frank in, its neon sign buzzing like a beacon. I needed noise, people, a place to think without the ghosts of my past whispering in my ear. I pushed through the door, the scent of beer and fried food hitting me like a wave. The bar was half full, locals hunched over drinks, their voices a low murmur. I settled at a table near the back, the folder tucked beside me. A waitress dropped off a coffee, black and steaming, and I cupped it, letting the warmth ground me. My eyes scanned the room, landing on a woman at the bar. 50-ish, sharp eyes behind glasses, her fingers flying over a laptop. She glanced up, caught my gaze, and offered a small nod, like she knew me. I didn't recognize her, but something about her, maybe the way she carried herself, confident but not flashy, made me pause. She closed her laptop and walked over, her boots soft on the wooden floor. Ronald Turner, right? Her voice was warm, with a hint of curiosity. I'm Elaine Harper, with the Hartford Chronicle. She slid into the chair across from me, uninvited but not unwelcome. Heard about your grand entrance at St. Luke's today. I raised an eyebrow, sipping my coffee. News travels fast. She smiled, a glint in her eye. Small town, big story. Mind if I ask what happened? Her tone was casual, but her gaze was sharp, like she could see the folder under my arm and the weight it carried. I hesitated. Trust was a luxury I couldn't afford, not after Mark and Kristen. But Elaine's eyes held no pity, no judgment, just a hunger for truth. I leaned forward, my voice low. My son and his wife tried to bury me. Literally. They forged my death to sell my company. Her brows lifted, but she didn't flinch. That's one hell of a family feud. She tapped her fingers on the table, thinking. You've got proof. I patted the folder. Enough to start. Elaine leaned closer, her voice dropping. I've been digging into some shady deals around town. Your son's name popped up, him and Kristen. They're not as clever as they think. She paused, studying me. I can help, Ronald. I know people, records, ways to expose this without you getting burned. I sat back, weighing her words. A journalist. Risky, but maybe exactly what I needed. Someone to shine a light on Mark and Kristen's lies, to make them squirm. Why help me? I asked, my tone blunt. What's in it for you? She shrugged, a wry smile tugging her lips. A story. Justice. Pick one. She reached into her bag, pulling out a business card and sliding it across the table. Think it over. But don't wait too long. People like them don't stop. I took the card, her name printed in crisp black letters. Elaine Harper, senior reporter. I thought of Frank's warning, be smart, not loud. Elaine could be the smart move, the ally I hadn't expected. Her hand brushed the folder as she stood, a small gesture but heavy with promise. Call me, she said, then headed back to the bar, leaving me with my coffee and a spark of something new. Hope, maybe. I left the PAB, the night air cool against my face. The folder felt lighter now, its contents a weapon instead of a wound. I walked home, Elaine's card in my pocket, her words echoing. Expose them. I could do that. I would. Back in my kitchen, I set the card on the table, next to the phone. Frank needed to hear this, to know I wasn't alone anymore. I picked up the receiver, my fingers steady, and started to dial. The office smelled of stale coffee and ink, a cramped space on the second floor of a Hartford brownstone where Frank had practiced law for decades. I pushed through the glass door, the folder of evidence heavy under my arm, its papers creased from my grip. My steps were steadier than they'd been in weeks, each one fueled by a purpose that drowned out the ache in my bones. The receptionist, a young woman with a tight bun, glanced up and nodded me toward Frank's office. I didn't pause. Time was a luxury I didn't have. Frank sat behind a cluttered desk, stacks of papers teetering like miniature skyscrapers. A single lamp cast a warm glow, catching the dust motes drifting in the air. He looked up, his glasses slipping down his nose, and gestured to a chair. You're early, Ron. That's a first. His tone was light, but his eyes were serious, scanning the folder as I set it down with a thud. No point waiting, I said, easing into the chair. The leather creaked under me, worn but solid, like the man across the desk. They've had enough of a head start. Frank opened the folder, his fingers flipping through the forged death certificate, the sale contract, the altered will. He let out a low whistle. This is a mess, but it's our mess now. We can file an injunction to freeze the company sale. Prove you're alive, and you've already made a scene about that, and their whole house of cards collapses. He pulled out a legal form, the paper crisp and official. Sign this, and I'll get it to the courthouse by noon. I took the pen he offered, its weight grounding me. The nib scratched against the paper, each stroke a reclaiming of what was mine. My company, my life's work, built from nothing but grit and long nights. I thought of Mark, his lazy grin as he asked for just one more favor, and Kristen, her eyes glinting at the sight of my ledgers. They'd tried to steal it all. My hand steadied, the signature bold and final. Ronald J. Turner. Not dead. Not defeated. Frank gathered the papers, tucking them into a briefcase. This'll hit them hard, Ron. But they won't go quietly. Mark's got your money to burn, and Kristen's got ambition to spare. Expect a fight. Let them fight, I said, my voice low, cold. They started this. I'm finishing it. He nodded, a faint smile tugging his lips. That's the Ron I know. Just, don't do anything rash. We're playing chess, not checkers. I leaned back, the chair creaking again. Chess. I could do that. I'd built a business by outsmarting competitors, reading people, knowing when to push and when to wait. Mark was sloppy, Kristen paranoid. I'd use that, turn their weaknesses into my moves. The folder sat between us, its contents a weapon now, not a wound. Documents, Frank had called them. To me, they were justice, inked and binding. My phone buzzed, the screen lighting up with Mark's name. I stared at it, my pulse quickening. Frank raised an eyebrow. You gonna answer that? Might as well. I hit accept, holding the phone to my ear. What do you want, Mark? His voice came through, sharp and unsteady. What the hell are you doing, Dad? Freezing the sale. You're ruining everything. The panic was raw, unfiltered, and it sent a grim satisfaction through me. Ruining everything? I echoed, my tone calm, cutting. You buried me, Mark. Forged my death, tried to sell my company. You don't get to talk about ruin. He sputtered, words tripping over each other. It wasn't like that. We thought you were gone, we were just. Save it, I snapped, my voice like a whip. You made your choice. Now live with it. I hung up before he could reply, the silence that followed heavy but sweet. His fear was proof I'd struck first, and struck well. Frank watched me, his expression unreadable. Feel better? Not yet, I said, standing. But I will. I tucked the folder under my arm, its weight a reminder of the fight ahead. Let me know when the injunction's filed. He nodded, already reaching for his phone. You'll hear from me by tonight. I left the office, the spring air hitting me as I stepped onto the street. Hartford buzzed around me, cars honking, trees budding, life moving on. My phone buzzed again, a text this time. Kristen. I didn't read it, not yet. Whatever she had to say could wait. I had a plan, allies, a path. The PAB wasn't far, and Elaine would be there, ready to dig deeper. I started walking, the folder secure, my steps firm despite the tremor in my legs. Mark and Kristen thought they'd outsmarted me. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The PAB was alive with the clink of glasses and the low hum of conversation, the air thick with the scent of fried potatoes and spilled beer. I sat in a corner booth, the wooden table scarred from years of careless hands. My phone glowed in the dim light, Kristen's post staring up at me like a taunt. Our family is heartbroken, she'd written, her words dripping with fake tears. Ronald's health has been fragile since his accident, and his recent behavior shows he's not himself. We ask for privacy as we care for him. A string of sad emojis followed, and the comments, dozens of them, piled on. Poor Kristen, one read. He must be delusional, said another. My fingers tightened around the phone, the plastic creaking. They were painting me as unhinged, a sick old man lashing out. Clever. Cruel. I set the phone down, my jaw clenched. The PAB's noise faded to a dull roar as I processed her move. Kristen wasn't just defending herself, she was attacking, trying to discredit me before I could expose her. Mark might have panicked, but Kristen was calculating, her words a digital document of slander meant to bury me again. I leaned back, the booth's vinyl squeaking, and let the anger settle into something sharper, colder. She'd made a mistake. This post wasn't strength, it was desperation. The door swung open, and Elaine strode in, her laptop bag slung over one shoulder, her hair slightly mussed from the spring breeze. She spotted me and slid into the booth, her eyes flicking to the phone. "Saw Kristen's little performance online," she said, her voice dry, a half-smile playing on her lips. "She's practically begging for sympathy. It's pathetic." "Pathetic, but dangerous," I said, sliding the phone toward her. "She's trying to turn the town against me. Make me look crazy." Elaine skimmed the post, her smile fading to a smirk. "This is what panic looks like, Ronald. She's scared. You froze the sale, showed up at the church, she knows she's losing control." She opened her laptop, the screen casting a pale glow on her face. "I did some digging. Mark's hired a lawyer, some hotshot from Boston. They're filing to contest the injunction, claiming you're not competent to manage your affairs." I let out a bitter laugh. "Competent? I built that company from nothing while Mark was blowing my money on sports cars." "Exactly." Elaine's fingers tapped the keyboard. "Pulling up a file. Their case is weak, forged documents don't hold up in court, especially with you walking around, very much alive. But they're betting on public opinion. Kristen's post is step one, make you the villain, them the victims." I stared at the phone, Kristen's words glowing like a beacon in the dark. "A document, in its own way, as false as the death certificate. So what's our move?" I asked, leaning forward. Elaine's eyes gleamed. "We hit back, but smarter. I've got contacts at your company, employees who've seen Mark's management up close. They're not happy. We get their statements, build a paper trail of his fraud. Pair that with the documents Frank's filing, and Kristen's sob story falls apart." She paused, her voice softening. "You're not alone in this, Ronald. People want the truth." I nodded, the weight in my chest easing slightly. Elaine was a lifeline, her confidence infectious. I thought of Mark's trembling voice on the phone, Kristen's calculated tears. They were scrambling, and I had the upper hand, for now. "How soon can we talk to these employees?" I asked. "Tomorrow," she said, closing her laptop with a snap. "I'll set it up. Meet me at my place, 9 sharp. Bring the folder. We're building a case, not just a story." She stood, slinging her bag over her shoulder. "Get some rest, Ronald. You'll need it." I managed a grim smile. Rest is overrated. I watched her go, the PAB's noise swelling around me. The phone sat on the table, Kristen's post still open, a challenge I'd meet head-on. I flipped it face down, the screen going dark, and stood, my legs steadier than they'd been in days. The spring night waited outside, Hartford streets quiet under a canopy of stars. I stepped out, the cool air brushing my face, and started walking. Tomorrow, Elaine and I would strike again. I could feel it, the tide turning, the truth clawing its way free. Elaine's house was a small Victorian on the edge of Hartford, its porch sagging under the weight of potted plants and thyme. I knocked, the folder of documents tucked under my arm, its edges worn from handling. The door swung open, and Elaine greeted me with a quick smile, her glasses perched on her nose. "Come in, Ronald. Coffee's on." The air inside smelled of roasted beans and old books, a warm contrast to the crisp May morning. Her living room was cluttered but cozy, shelves stuffed with novels, a tabby cat curled on a sunlit cushion, a lamp casting soft light over a worn oak table. We settled at the table, papers spread between us like a battle map. Elaine's notebook was open, her pen scratching notes as she outlined our plan, a newspaper article to expose Mark and Kristen's fraud, backed by hard evidence. I set the folder down, its contents, forged certificate, contract, witness names, a growing arsenal. Documents, again, but this time mine, not theirs. They felt like keys now, unlocking the truth I'd been denied. Elaine sipped her coffee, the mug steaming in her hands. "We've got the legal side with Frank," she said, her voice steady, "but this article will hit them where it hurts, their reputation. Kristen's built her whole life on appearances. We tear that down, she cracks." Her eyes met mine, sharp with determination. "You ready to play dirty?" I nodded, a faint smile tugging my lips. Dirtier than they did. I thought of Kristen's post, her lies glowing on my phone screen last night. She'd tried to bury me in public opinion, but Elaine was right, reputation was her weakness, and we'd exploit it. We started with a call to Joe, a foreman at my company who'd been with me for 20 years. Elaine put her phone on speaker, and Joe's gravelly voice filled the room. "Mark came in a month ago," he said, his tone heavy with disgust. "Told us you were gone, said he was taking over. Wanted me to sign off on some sale papers. I refused, didn't feel right. He got real pushy, Ronald. Threatened my job." I leaned forward, my hands clenched. "You didn't sign?" "Nope," Joe said. "Told him to shove it. Few others did too. We knew something was off." He paused, his voice softening. "Glad you're back, boss. We need you." The words hit harder than I expected, a reminder of the loyalty Mark had betrayed. I glanced at Elaine, who was scribbling notes, her pen flying. "Thanks, Joe," I said, my voice steady despite the knot in my chest. "We'll make this right." We hung up, and Elaine grinned, tapping her notebook. "That's gold, Ronald. Joe's statement, plus the documents, paints a clear picture. Mark coerced employees, forged your death, it's fraud, plain and simple." She pulled a letter from the folder, one I hadn't noticed before, its letterhead from a Boston law firm. "Found this in my records. Mark's lawyer sent it to your company, pressuring the board to approve the sale. Sloppy. It's practically an admission." I took the letter, its paper crisp under my fingers. Another document, another nail in their coffin. "How'd you get this?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. Elaine winked. "I've got my ways. Let's just say I know people who owe me favors." She leaned back, her coffee mug empty now. "This article's coming together. We've got Joe, the letter, Frank's injunction. One more witness, and we're ready to print." I felt a spark, not just of hope, but of something fiercer, certainty. Elaine wasn't just an ally, she was a partner, her warmth and wit pulling me from the dark. I thought of Mark's trembling voice, Kristen's panicked post. They were unraveling, and we were building. "You're good at this," I said, the words slipping out. She laughed, a sound like bells in the quiet room. "Years of chasing stories, Ronald. You're not so bad yourself. We're a regular detective team." Her cat leapt onto the table, nudging my hand, and I scratched its ears, the normalcy grounding me. We worked late, the lamp's glow steady as the hours ticked by. Elaine drafted the article's opening, reading bits aloud, sharp, damning, true. I added details, memories of my company's early days, the sweat and pride Mark had never understood. The folder grew, Joe's statement now joined by notes from another employee, a secretary who'd overheard Kristen's calls to the buyer. Each word was a brick in the wall we were building, solid and unshakable. As midnight neared, Elaine yawned, closing her notebook. "We'll finish tomorrow, get this to my editor by noon. It'll hit the stands the day after." She stood, stretching. "Go home, Ronald. You've earned a break." I gathered the folder, its weight familiar now, comforting. "Not sure I know what a break is anymore," I said, but I smiled, the first real one in weeks. I stepped onto her porch, the night sky above Hartford dotted with stars, the air cool and sharp. The article was close, the truth closer. I started down the street, Elaine's words echoing in my mind. One more day, and Mark and Kristen would face the consequences. I was ready. The newspaper lay on my doorstep, folded neatly, its edges damp from the morning dew. I bent to pick it up, my fingers brushing the rough paper, the faint scent of ink sharp in the cool May air. The headline screamed in bold black letters, "Local businessmen betrayed, son and daughter-in-law exposed in fraud scandal." Elaine's name sat below it, her byline a badge of truth. My heart thudded, not with fear, but with a quiet triumph. This was it, the moment Mark and Kristen's lies crumbled for all of Hartford to see. I carried the paper inside, the floorboards creaking under my steps. The kitchen was dim, the old clock ticking steadily, its rhythm a reminder of time reclaimed. I spread the paper on the table, the ink smudging my fingertips as I read. Elaine had woven a damning story, the forged death certificate, Mark's coercion of employees, Kristen's secret calls to buyers. Joe's testimony was there, raw and honest, alongside the Boston lawyer's letter, its words twisted into evidence of guilt. Each sentence was a brick in the wall we'd built, solid and unyielding. I leaned back, a smile tugging my lips. They'd tried to bury me. Now, they were the ones exposed. I pulled on my jacket and stepped outside, the newspaper tucked under my arm. Hartford buzzed with spring life, dogwoods blooming, kids biking down Elm Street, the air sweet with lilac. I walked toward downtown, my legs stronger now, each step lighter than the last. At the corner cafe, a cluster of locals hunched over their own copies of the paper. Their voices low but urgent. "Can you believe it?" one woman muttered, her glasses slipping. "That Kristen, acting all high and mighty, and for what? Money?" Her friend shook her head, glancing my way. Our eyes met, and she nodded, a small gesture of respect. I nodded back, my chest swelling. Further down, at the flower shop, old Mrs. Carney stood behind the counter, her hands busy with roses. She spotted me and waved me in, her smile wide. "Ronald Turner, you're a sight for sore eyes," she said, wiping her hands on her apron. "Read that article this morning. You showed M, didn't you?" She reached across the counter, squeezing my arm. "Proud of you, dear. Always knew you were tougher than they thought." "Thanks, Mrs. Carney," I said, my voice steady but warm. Her words settled into me, a balm after months of betrayal. I left the shop, the newspaper feeling heavier now, not with weight, but with meaning. A document, in its own way, the final one, inked with truth. I found Elaine in the park, sitting on a bench under a budding magnolia, a fresh copy of the paper in her hands. She looked up as I approached, her grin sharp and satisfied. "Well, if it isn't Hartford's own Lazarus," she teased, folding the paper. "You see the buzz out there? Town's eating this up." I sat beside her, the bench cool against my legs. Couldn't miss it. Mrs. Carney practically threw me a parade. I handed her my copy, the headline catching the sunlight. "You did good, Elaine. Better than good." She shrugged, but her eyes sparkled. "Just doing my job. Though I'll admit, nailing those two felt personal." She leaned closer, her voice dropping. "Heard from my editor, the story's going viral. Even the Boston papers might pick it up. Mark and Kristen are done, Ronald. Socially, legally, all of it." I nodded, the weight of her words sinking in. Done. The word felt final, but I knew better. People like Mark and Kristen didn't vanish quietly. I thought of their faces in the church, pale and panicked, and wondered what they were plotting now. "They'll try something," I said, my tone calm but certain. "They always do." "Let them try," Elaine said, her grin fierce. "We've got the truth, and half the town on your side. They're out of moves. She stood, brushing petals from her coat. Come on, let's grab coffee. Celebrate a little. I followed her, the park alive with birdsong and soft breezes. Hartford felt different today, not just a backdrop but a witness, its streets carrying the story we'd told. We passed a newsstand, the article's headline plastered across every copy, and I felt a surge of pride, not just for me, but for Elaine, for Joe, for everyone who'd stood up. The newspaper was more than paper now, it was proof, a document of justice. Back home, I set the paper on the table, its edges curling slightly. The phone rang, the screen flashing Mark's name. My pulse quickened, but not with fear, with readiness. I picked up the receiver, holding it loosely, and stared out the window at the spring dusk settling over Hartford. Whatever he had to say, I was prepared. The truth was out, and I was no longer the man they'd tried to erase. The knock came sharp and hesitant, like a thief unsure of the lock. I crossed the foyer, the floorboards creaking under my weight, and opened the door. Mark and Kristen stood on the porch, their faces pale under the dim glow of the street lamp. Mark's tie was loose, his shirt wrinkled, as if he'd slept in it. Kristen's hair, usually perfect, hung in limp strands, her designer coat creased. They looked small, diminished, like actors who'd forgotten their lines. The spring mist curled around them, a fitting shroud for their defeat. "Dad," Mark started, his voice low, cracking. "Can we talk?" His eyes darted to the ground, avoiding mine. Kristen clutched her purse, her knuckles white, her lips pressed into a thin line. I stepped aside, gesturing them in. "Say what you came to say." My tone was cold, steady, a wall they couldn't breach. The door shut behind them with a soft thud, its sound final, like a chapter closing. The foyer was dim, the air heavy with the scent of damp wood and old memories. A coffee stain on the rug lay like a scar. A reminder of better days I no longer mourned. They shuffled to the living room, stopping near the couch but not sitting. Mark cleared his throat, his hands fidgeting. "We're sorry, Dad. Really. It got out of hand. We didn't mean for it to go this far." His words were rehearsed, brittle, like glass ready to shatter. Kristen nodded, her voice softer, pleading. "It was a mistake, Ronald. We thought you were gone, and we were just trying to secure the future. For all of us." Her eyes flicked to mine, searching for a crack, but found none. Her apology was a performance, and I was no longer her audience. "A mistake," I said, my voice cutting through their excuses. "You forged my death, Kristen. You and Mark sold my company, my life's work, while I was fighting to breathe in a hospital bed. That's not a mistake. That's betrayal." I stepped closer, my gaze locking on Mark's. "You were my son. I gave you everything. And you chose this." Mark flinched, his shoulders hunching. I know. I screwed up. But we can fix it, Dad. We'll make it right, I swear." His voice broke, and for a moment, I saw the boy he'd been, small, hopeful, mine. But that boy was gone, buried under years of greed and lies. Kristen's composure cracked, her voice rising. "You're being unfair, Ronald. We were scared, okay? And you come back, tearing everything apart, humiliating us in front of the whole town." She gestured wildly, her purse slipping to her elbow. "You could have talked to us, but no, you had to play the hero." I laughed, a low, bitter sound that silenced her. "Humiliate you? You did that yourselves. The article, the truth, that's on you." I pointed to the door, its frame looming behind them. "You wanted my life, my money, my name. You got none of it. And now you're here, begging. Why? Because the town knows? Because your precious reputation's in tatters?" Kristen's face flushed, her eyes glistening, but she said nothing. Mark stepped forward, his hands outstretched. "Please, Dad. We're family. Doesn't that mean anything? I looked at him, really looked, and felt the last thread of hope snap. Family doesn't bury each other, Mark. My voice was quiet now, final. You made your choice. Live with it. Kristen grabbed Mark's arm, her nails digging in. Let's go, she hissed, her voice trembling. He's made up his mind. She stormed toward the door, Mark trailing like a shadow. I followed, my steps slow, deliberate. The door opened, the mist swirling in, and they stepped out, their silhouettes fading into the night. I closed the door, the lock clicking with a sound that echoed in my chest. It was over. They were gone. I walked to the kitchen, the house silent but no longer oppressive. On the table sat a framed photo of my company's first office, the crew grinning under a summer sky. I traced the edges, my fingers steady. I'd won, not just the company, but my life, my dignity. Tomorrow, I'd meet Elaine, plan the next steps. The phone sat nearby, and I picked it up, dialing her number. The line rang, and I leaned against the counter, the weight of the day lifting, replaced by a quiet resolve. The park smelled of wet grass and blooming magnolias, the May sun filtering through the trees in golden patches. I walked beside Elaine, our steps slow, the crunch of gravel underfoot a steady rhythm. She was laughing, her head tilted back, recounting how her editor had called the article, the scoop of the decade. Her joy was infectious, and I found myself smiling, the weight of the past weeks lighter in her company. Hartford felt alive around us, birds chirping, a jogger passing with a nod, the city breathing with us. You should have seen the newsstand this morning, Elaine said, her eyes bright behind her glasses. Papers gone in an hour. You're a local legend, Ronald. She nudged my arm, her sleeve brushing mine. Ever think about writing a book? How to come back from the dead and win? I chuckled, shaking my head. I'll leave the writing to you. I'm better with blueprints. The thought of my company stirred something in me, pride, yes, but also possibility. I'd saved it, but now I wanted more. Growth, new projects, a legacy that wasn't just about survival. Elaine stopped by a bench, her expression softening. Seriously, though, you should speak at the community center next month. Tell your story. People need to hear it, especially the women who've been through their own betrayals. Her voice was earnest, her belief in me a quiet strength. I hesitated, the idea daunting. Me, a speaker. But her faith was a spark, and I nodded. All right. But only if you're there to make sure I don't ramble. Deal, she said, grinning. We started walking again, the park opening to a view of downtown Hartford, its red brick buildings glowing in the light. My company's office was there, a modest 3-story structure I'd built from nothing. I felt a pull to see it, to stand in its halls again. Let's stop by the office, I said, glancing at Elaine. Feel like a detour? She raised an eyebrow but nodded. Lead the way, boss. The walk was short, the city's hum growing louder as we neared the business district. My office stood at the corner of Main and Cedar, its glass doors catching the sun like a mirror. I pushed them open, the familiar scent of fresh paint and coffee hitting me. The lobby was quiet, but as we stepped inside, a ripple of movement spread. Joe, my foreman, spotted me first, his weathered face breaking into a grin. Ronald, he called, and suddenly, the room erupted. Employees gathered, their voices overlapping, secretaries, builders, even the new intern I'd barely met. They clapped, the sound echoing off the walls, and I stood frozen, my throat tight. Joe stepped forward, shaking my hand. Welcome back, boss. We never doubted you. His grip was firm, his eyes steady, and I felt the weight of their loyalty settle into me. Thanks, Joe, I said, my voice rough but clear. All of you. This place, it's ours again. The applause swelled, and Elaine clapped too, her smile wide. I caught her eye, grateful for the friend who'd helped make this possible. We moved to my office, a small room with a view of Hartford's skyline. The desk was cluttered with plans I'd left months ago, a photo of the original crew tucked in a corner. I ran my fingers over it, the faces familiar, enduring. "We're not stopping here," I told Elaine, my voice firm. "New projects, maybe a branch in New Haven. I'm not done building." She leaned against the doorframe, her arms crossed. "Didn't think you were. You're too stubborn to quit." Her tone was teasing, but her eyes held respect. "Dinner tonight?" "My treat. We've earned it." I nodded, a warmth spreading in my chest. "You're on." I opened the office door, the motion smooth, deliberate, a new beginning, not just for the company, but for me. Back in the lobby, I spoke with the team, sketching plans for a staff meeting, their enthusiasm fueling mine. The future was open, uncharted, mine to shape. As evening fell, I stood at my office window, Hartford's lights twinkling below. The city had seen my fall and rise, and it felt like home again. I grabbed a pen, jotting notes for tomorrow, calls to suppliers, a meeting with Frank, a speech for the community center. The paper filled quickly, my handwriting steady, each word a step forward. Elaine was waiting, and the night held promise. I slipped the pen in my pocket and headed out, the door closing softly behind me. If you liked this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.